This is Gardening in America, and I'm Ed Hume. Today we're in Couer D Alene, Idaho, in a gorgeous home garden that was featured in the Couer D Alene Garden Club Garden Tour in 1997. And I'm with one of the owners, Cami Beebe. Cami, what part of the garden are we in here?
Well, Ed, we're standing right now in the rose garden. This is a little country garden. I've always been charmed with the English cottage garden style, and so that's what this garden is kind of based on. And I like the formal rose garden, so
Right.
This is the rose garden we're standing
And a
in.
magnificent collection of perennials in the background as well. Really
Thank you.
outstanding.
Thank you.
Now, tell me a little bit about the garden, because you've done a magnificent job of incorporating a natural setting and then coming in more, not into a formal garden, but the English style garden.
Well, coming in to the home through the driveway, that's more of a natural area
Right.
out there, and we reforested it. It had been logged before we bought the property, and so we reforested it some and planted a lot of native plants and wanted to bring that native area into the beds, so some of the beds actually have the native plants in them as well.
Yeah, it's beautifully done. This is an idea garden, kind of a little, every time you go around a corner you see something different. You have a secret garden over here,
We have a secret garden.
and you have another area kind of set aside that's different. And then back here you have a nice water feature. Is that operating year-round, or?
It doesn't operate during the winter.
Okay.
We turn the pump off and take it apart during the winter.
Was this something you designed, you and your husband?
Together we designed it, and we had a landscape designer that helped us with the pond.
Helped you construct it?
Yeah, helped us construct it.
The setting out front here is beautiful, and you've got a lot of permanent plants too. Is that a design that you and your husband came up with?
Some of it was our design, and some of it was the landscape designers.
It's
This
beautifully
part
done.
of the garden was more our design.
I see, sure. And your color combinations. Tell us a little bit about that, because you have some favorites, don't you?
Well, I was talking earlier that I never really liked yellow flowers very much. In the last couple of years, yellow and blue has just appealed to me. And so more and more now we have patches of yellow and blue flowers combined in the garden.
And they are so nice. They really combine well, I think, in the garden. And also, I noticed out front, for example, you've got a gorgeous, and it happened to be in full bloom when we're here, so I wanted to share it with our viewers, a smoke tree.
Yes.
It's really
It's at its
outstanding.
prime right now, I
Yeah.
think. Yeah.
Now, while we've been talking, of course, our viewers have been seeing all this beautiful garden, and I want to thank you for inviting us here and sharing with our viewers your beautiful landscape.
Well, thank you, Ed. It's been our pleasure. We're very honored.
Thank you.
Thank you.
During the heat of summer, one of the most misunderstood parts of summer gardening is that of watering. So let's discuss a few things that'll make your watering chores a little bit easier. I'm using an oscillating sprinkler here, and what we need to do is to put down 1 inch of water a week, no more than that. But here's where we make the mistake. We water just a little bit at a time. The best idea is to put down the inch all at one time. And that's why these containers are out here, to measure when you get 1 inch. Now, if you'll do that time-wise, you can say, oh, gee, if I let the sprinkler run for 2 hours, I put down 1 inch of water, and from then on, you never have to measure it again. By the way, by placing containers away from the sprinkler like that, you can also see how efficient the sprinkler is. Because if you have a 1/2 inch of water here and a whole inch of water over here, then you're not getting a good even distribution of water. Now, if you've got a specific area, for example, along the edge of the house, which is usually quite narrow, or the parking strip, there are square type sprinklers, and that'll save you a lot of money. Why use a round sprinkler that's going to water the walk or the streetway or your neighbors? Instead, it'll be a lot more efficient if you use that kind of a sprinkler. Now, how do you know whether you're getting good water penetration? One of the ways is to take a straight edge shovel like this, penetrate the turf, and actually pull it back, and then look down in there and see if the soil is wet. If you have thatch or something of that nature, it's going to shed a lot of the water off to the side. So this way then you can determine how deep the water is going into the turf or into the flower beds too. Now, here's another idea, and this really works neat. This, of course, is a soaker hose, and it fits right onto the into the garden hose. And all you need to do is to just actually extend it up into the beds, and then there are these little hooks that you can actually hook it in place. And then whenever you want to water this bed, all you do is fasten the garden hose to it. Very simple way of doing it. One other thing that's very important for those of you that have automatic sprinkler systems, by all means do this check here with the shovel, because people are asking me all the time, hey, we have an automatic sprinkler, it comes on at 4 o'clock in the morning, our lawn's still turning yellow. And when I look at it, they're getting water penetration about that deep. The sprinkler doesn't stay on long enough at one time. It's a little bit every day, and that does no good. So what you want to do is then go to the box and actually set the timer and experiment a little for a week until you know how long it takes to get good water penetration in the turf. And if you do those things, gosh, your sprinkling is going to be so much easier. You're going to save money and you're going to save time too. Now we're going to visit with a hometown hero. This is one of my favorite segments because it gives us an opportunity to visit with a home gardener that's done an outstanding job of gardening around the home. Today I'm with Fred Ross of Lakewood, Washington. Fred, this is magnificent. How long have you maintained this garden?
Well, we moved in here in 1977, and I started changing some of the landscaping at that time. But the garden as you see it now started in our minds, about 3 years ago. There used to be a swimming pool over here, and the kids grew up and left and so on, and there was a lot of concrete around it, so we decided, well, let's get rid of it. We'd like a water feature, and so we started seriously 3 years ago with what we have now.
And you've done a beautiful job. What happened to the lawn? Always when you have kids, you always have a lawn, and there's no lawn here now.
Well, again, they were gone. It wasn't big enough to play much football anyhow.
Is that right?
But I decided, well, in order to get all the flowers I want, we're going to have to get rid of the grass. So I got rid of the grass and gave away the lawnmowers.
Now, did you have any help in designing this?
Well, yeah, we had Jeffrey Glander down in Olympia as a garden architect, and he listened to what we wanted, looked the place over, and drew up some plans and figured out how to put the pools in and put a sprinkler system in and so on. So we worked with him.
And how much time do you spend on maintaining this area?
Oh, it's hard to say, but probably 2 or 3 hours a day, because that's what I want to do.
Sure,
you
sure.
know.
Tell us a little bit about the hammock area. That's really outstanding.
Okay, well, the hammock area was not in the original plan.
I see.
But I got a copy of Sunset and leafing through it, and there was this hammock. And I said, that's just what I want. So I ripped the page out and sent it down to Jeffrey and says, Jeff, put this into the garden. And so they added that on.
Now, what would be your favorite time of the year here in the garden?
Oh, it's hard to say. Springtime is nice because the daffodils come up and all those early flowers. And I say, golly, we ought to get this on tape or something. And then it just goes through the seasons. Like right now is a real good time because the fuchsias are all blooming, and I love fuchsias.
Oh,
It
yeah.
helps a lot.
Do you have
too.
a favorite spot in the garden?
It varies. I like to sit on the bench over there certain times of the day. My wife loves to sit on the bench and read. Sometimes we'll sit out over there in the center of the yard where you can get a whole view down here. Sometimes like to put a chair down in front of the hammock or just lie down in the hammock and look that way.
Thanks, Fred. By sharing your garden with us, it's given our viewers some great ideas that they can use in their own garden as well. One of the most interesting of all plant families, I think, is the heather family, because there are varieties that flower at all times of the year: spring, summer, fall, and winter. So by selection of varieties, you can have them going for a long time. Let's talk about a few of those that flower in the summer and the early fall. And the first one here is a variety called Cerealii, and it has white flowers, has an upright growth, probably to about 15 to 18 inches in height. But I like the variegated foliage, and whenever we select plants, we should look at the foliage color because that can add a lot of interest to the garden. Now here's another golden leaf variety. This is called Couer, and it grows about 12 inches high, and the flowers on this one are lavender in color. It's more upright, as you can see. It's a very, very pretty variety. And look at the deep green foliage of this variety. This is called Allegro. It grows about 18 inches high and very bushy, as you can see, and the flowers on it are crimson in color. And then here's a very low growing variety here. This is a very popular variety too. It's called J.H. Hamilton. It only grows about 9 inches high, and the flowers on it are double pink, really very, very attractive. Then, talking about foliage color, look at here. This is a gray foliage. So again, we have the golden, we have the green, and now we have a gray foliage variety. This one is called Silver Night. Of course, it gets its name from the silvery-like foliage. The flower on this one is lavender in color. And then one of the most popular of all varieties of summer flowering heather is this one. It's a variety called H.E. Beale. And the double pink flowers are outstanding on this. This makes a great cut flower. And it's a very attractive flower, of course, in the garden as well. Here's another variety, and it's pretty well through flowering, as you can see. It's called Velvet Night. It grows about 12 inches high. And the flowers are, well, they're described as a deep beetroot in color. Now, I selected this purposely, and I'm going to move a couple of these others away so you can see. When a heather gets through flowering, this is what's important, is that you go in and you cut off just below the old spent flowers. Now, is what happens when I do that is that encourages from each one of these places that I've cut 2 or 3 new growths. So what's going to happen is that this plant is going to get 2 or 3 times bushier, and in so doing, the other important thing then is that it's going to flower 2 or 3 times more prolific the following year. Now you can also do this with the head shears, and it goes much quicker if you do it that way. But you can see very quickly, and we could take cuttings from that tip growth if we wanted to as well. You can count on plenty of color from the heather because they flower at the various seasons of the year. Notice the camellia behind me. That was transplanted from another part of the garden. It's coming along fine. But this is the typical foliage of that camellia. Now, notice this one that's discolored. That's caused by sunburn because of the heat of the sun. So plants that get that kind of condition, we want to give them a little extra special care when the temperatures really get high. Here's another example of rhododendron sun damage. Sometimes it'll appear in this fashion, just a spot here and there, and very often the foliage above helps cover part of the leaf so then it remains green. Or one that's fully exposed can look like this. And by the way, the cutouts here, this was done by a bee. It's called a cutter bee, and it makes its nest with parts of the foliage, and in this case, it selected the rhododendron foliage. Now, here's another, what I consider a very important lesson. You'll notice the flower on this butterfly bush, or buddleia, is through flowering. You'll notice if you go back on the stem a little bit further, that there's a branching here. And if I go in and cut like so, removing this old flower, this is what happens. I'll show you right up here. See, I took the old flower stem out of this one, and now look, 2 flowers in place of the one. And you know, a lot of you that have the butterfly bush or buddleias wonder why they don't flower all summer. Well, it's simple that you have to take off the old flower. And you know, that's so true of so many of Mother Nature's plants. Get rid of the old flower, and then new flowers will continue to come on. And this was in gorgeous flower, and has been, in fact, twice already this summer. And it's coming on now with its 3rd flush of flower, and I'll bet you we'll get 4 flowerings out of it. So if you'll just keep the dead flowers picked, that's what's important. Look at here at the zinnias. Beautiful flowers, aren't they? Do you know that these plants were gorgeous earlier? Look at the foliage there. Oh, wow. Just absolutely ruined, isn't it? Typical damage is slugs. How did I correct it? What I did was to take a pop bottle, a plastic pop bottle, cut it right down through the middle, like so, put a little bit of slug bait inside, turned the top and inverted it in the bottom. Now, the slug bait's inside, the slugs are drawn inside, they crawl inside to get the bait and die. And so you don't have the mess of slug bait, but at the same time your bait is inside, so hopefully it's protected from the dogs and the cats and the birds and small children even. And the beauty here is that you can easily hide it in the foliage of your plants. Hope that helps you control your slugs and also to keep your buddleias blooming and to protect your plants as well. We have two really interesting plants of the week this week. The beautiful Emperor 1 Japanese maple and the very colorful golden foliage of the dwarf Japanese barberry. And this is a variety called Golden Nugget, really an unusual color. First, let's talk about the maple though. This is really an interesting variety, Emperor 1, because it only grows about 15 feet tall and about 15 feet in width. So it's really pretty, and it gets gorgeous scarlet red foliage in the fall. And speaking of scarlet red foliage, look at the new growth. Look how beautiful that is as well. So not only do you have the crimson color of the mature growth, but you also have this beautiful bright scarlet color of the new growth during the growing season. So it's an interesting tree. Plus it has an interesting branching habit. Now the one thing that you want to know about this plant is that it's very hardy. It'll take it down to about 10 to 20 degrees below zero. So it's really a nice one. Planted in filtered sun, so it gets some protection from the hot sun, but at the same time not in full shade. Now, here's another neat one. Oh, look at the combination. Isn't that pretty too, where you have the red foliage of the maple and then the beautiful golden foliage of the barberry. This is a variety called Golden Nugget, and it only grows about 12 inches high and grows about 18 inches wide. So it's a rather dwarf plant. It'll take full, hot, bright sun, and in fact, that's where it gets the best foliage color in that kind of an environment. Now, the flowers are not significant. They appear in springtime, but it's the foliage color that's the outstanding characteristic of it. Very hardy, down to 20 to 30 degrees below zero. We're on the outskirts of Spokane, Washington, in a beautiful private garden, and I'm with the owner, Dottie Bender. Dottie, in this area, what was here before?
Cows.
Is that?
Yes, this was all a pasture.
Oh,
it
wow.
was rather over-intimidating when I moved here. I moved from a mobile home with a small, neat yard, and then ended up with all the cows and all the grass. Not the cows, thank God. They took the cows.
They did.
They took the cows, but slowly came in a little bit at a time.
Oh yeah, you've done a beautiful
And,
job here.
And tackled it a little inch at a time.
Is that how you do it, an inch at a time? Tell me, how'd you come up with the design?
That's sort of funny. My husband was very creative when it came to mowing. This is his contribution to gardening, is mowing. And he got tired of just going back and forth, so he made little islands of grass.
Oh, wow.
And some of the islands I liked. And so I said, hey, don't get rid of those. I'm going to plant plants, and I'm going to plant grasses because I love the grasses.
Sure.
So I just started doing that.
And that's kind of one of your favorites. You've got a lot of perennials and a lot of annuals in the garden, but you have a lot of the grasses.
I've got
too,
about 60 different kinds.
Oh, wow.
So they're a lot of fun. They're neat.
Are they pretty easy to maintain?
There's no maintenance.
No maintenance
No
on the
maintenance at
grasses.
all. You only have to cut them down come early spring. And that's all you do. Sometimes you can divide them if you want to, share them with your friends, but otherwise there's no problem.
You know, I like to share gardens like this with our viewers because you've so nicely used the various leaf textures and flower colors too in the garden, and the leaf colors too. And that gives them all kinds of ideas. But what I need to know is, how much time do you spend in the garden?
Nowadays, I spend probably a couple of hours a week. I mean, a week. I should be so lucky. A couple of hours a day.
A couple hours a day.
Yeah.
Oh, so
I have
maybe-
been known to spend 6 to 8 hours a day.
I see. And do you have any favorites in the garden as far as the plants are concerned?
I really just love them all, but I am partial to the ornamental grasses. I have to admit that. And I do love the lilies, and I love iris, and I love annuals.
Sure.
So it's real hard to find one place that you like any better than the other.
What do you do for winter protection for the garden?
Like I say, the annuals I tear out and dispose of them, put them in a compost heap. Some plants that are going to be really yucky come next spring, I just cut them down to the ground. But otherwise, unless I've just planted them, I don't mulch them or anything.
You
I
don't?
just, no, I have a live or die.
Sure, you either make it or you don't
Yeah,
make it. That's
strictly.
really neat, and thank you very much for sharing the garden with us. We really appreciate it. That's all the time we have today. Hope you can join me at the same time next time for Gardening in America.